You ever watch someone's whole world fall apart right in front of you? I mean, I'm talking the kind of moment where a person who's always strutted around like they own the place suddenly realizes the game's up and there's absolutely nothing they can do about it. That's exactly what I saw the morning Betty Taylor, the almighty HOA president who'd terrorized us for 3 long years, went sheet white in the middle of that crowded conference room. Her lawyer, this smug guy named Douglas Kim, was fumbling through a stack of papers like maybe he'd find a magic trick in there, but his face had panic written all over it. You could tell Betty thought her money, her connections, her little army of legal lapdogs made her untouchable. What she didn't know, the quiet software engineer she'd been picking on, that's me, by the way, had a very particular friend and a whole lot more fight in her than Betty ever saw coming. Let me back up a sec, because honestly, the way this all unfolded was just too good. My name's Sarah James, and 6 months ago, I thought I'd finally landed in paradise. Willowbrook, the kind of place with postcard lawns, tree-lined streets, neighbors who wave as you drive by. The HOA, according to the glossy brochure, was there to protect our property values and maintain community standards. Cute, right? I work in cybersecurity, spend my days tracking down system vulnerabilities and patching up digital holes, always hunting for the pattern everyone else misses. All I wanted was a peaceful spot to decompress after hours squinting at code. Instead, I got Betty Taylor. Now, Betty had been president of our HOA for something like a decade, and she ran the place with this blend of Southern hospitality and North Korean dictatorship. She was in her 50s, always dressed to the nines, hair and nails flawless, and she smiled like she was doing you a favor, but that smile never quite made it to her eyes. My first weekend, I get a violation notice. My crime? Apparently, my mailbox wasn't the right shade of black. Not jet, not onyx, but something so specific, I'm convinced only Betty herself could tell the difference. And naturally, the fine was $50, with a threat for more if I didn't comply. You know what I mean? I figured, hey, probably just an overzealous committee member. Called up the HOA office to sort it out. That's when I met Amy, Betty's assistant, who chirped that the rules had been updated and, surprise, I'd have to talk to Betty directly. So I do. Betty's tone? Condescending as a teacher, catching you chewing gum in class. She tells me, basically, newbies need to learn the ropes, and that it's everybody's job to keep up community standards. I asked to see these guidelines, and she tells me they'll be available at the next HOA meeting, which, of course, isn't for 3 weeks. So yeah, I repainted my mailbox. Thought, okay, that's done. I was so wrong. 2 weeks later, there's another violation. My garbage can's visible too long after pickup. Fine, $75. Then it was my garden hose, my car being 6 inches off the curb. It got to where I started dreading the mail. But the real kicker? Early December, I put up some basic Christmas lights and a wreath. Nothing wild. Next thing I know, I'm getting a notice that my decorations exceed allowed square footage. That fine? $200, with a threat of legal action if I didn't take them down immediately. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about the rules. This was about control. And Betty had decided I was her new favorite target. So I started doing what I do best, collecting data, documenting everything. And, oh, did the pattern show up quick. Betty's friends never got violations, even with their over-the-top decorations and gaudy landscaping. But anyone who dared question her, buried in citations and fines. So I show up at the next HOA meeting, thinking maybe I could just talk it out like adults. That was adorable of me. The place felt like Betty's throne room. She's at the head of the table, board members flanking her like guards. When it's time for new business, I politely raise my hand, ask for clarification about the rules that seem to change whenever Betty sneezes. Her answer? Swift and brutal. Maybe you should have done your research before buying here, she says. She launches into this lecture about respect and compliance, her board nodding along like those dashboard bobbleheads. But the real jaw-dropper was when I asked for a printed copy of the guidelines. She says they're proprietary, not for distribution. I point out pretty gently that governing documents are supposed to be available to all homeowners. Betty gets red in the face, snaps that I'm being disruptive, and actually has me escorted out by the community security guard. Poor guy looked mortified. Walking back to my car that night, I realized I was up against someone who truly believed she was above her own rules. And let me tell you, when you work in cybersecurity, you know the most dangerous vulnerabilities are the ones nobody thinks to check. So I dug in, started pulling HOA documents from the state oversight office, bylaws, amendments, the whole works. Betty had signed every amendment in the last decade, each one tightening the board's grip and stripping away homeowner rights, all passed at meetings with barely anyone there. Then I noticed something else. Betty was using her power to control who lived here. Families with kids denied playground equipment. People working from home cited for traffic. Elderly folks hit with special assessments until they had to move. Social engineering, plain and simple. But the smoking gun? The finances. Now, every homeowner's entitled to see the books. But when I asked, Amy said the records were being audited. Pressed her for a timeline. She stalled and told me to speak with Mrs. Taylor. Betty, predictably, was unavailable. That's when my professional instincts kicked in. I combed through public records, property transactions, court filings, tax docs. And suddenly, I saw the trail. The HOA had collected over $200,000 for improvements, landscaping, security, repairs. But I looked around. Nothing had changed. The grass was patchy, the security upgrades were a few rusty cameras, the roads were full of potholes. So I started photographing everything, checking contractor records, matching invoices with actual work. And guess what? Some contractors didn't exist. Others were real, but never did work in Willowbrook. Turns out, Betty had created shell companies, fake contractors, and funneled HOA money straight into her own accounts. The special assessments, the insane fines, all of it, just a cash grab. But Betty's big mistake? She thought nobody would look. She counted on people being too busy, too scared, too trusting. She wasn't ready for someone with my skills, my stubborn streak, or my friends. Which brings us to Nathan Lee, my college roommate, now the state's attorney general. We kept in touch over the years, not super close, but enough. I shot off an email explaining everything I'd found. His office was all over it. Nathan said they'd actually been searching for a case like this, systematic HOA fraud, big numbers, lots of victims. He asked if I'd cooperate with a formal investigation. Heck yes, I would. Nathan warned me things would get ugly before they got better. He was right. Within days, I got a certified letter from Douglas Kim, Betty's bulldog attorney. Demanded payment of $3,000 in fines, plus legal costs, threatening a lawsuit if I didn't pay up. It was pure intimidation, and honestly, it made me laugh. It meant Betty was rattled. I forwarded everything to Nathan. His take. These threats were mostly bark, not bite. But Betty wasn't done. She ramped up the harassment. Violation notices started arriving almost daily. Too long grass, garbage cans wrong color, house numbers faded. Some violations were for things that were literally impossible, like garbage cans out on the wrong day when trash pickup was delayed by a holiday. Sometimes I got contradictory citations. Too many decorations one day, not enough the next. And then she crossed the line, citing me for things like a Veterans Day flag or a yard sign supporting a local school. Illegal, by the way. I documented every last detail, photos, timestamps, all of it. Meanwhile, Nathan's team dug even deeper. They subpoenaed the HOA records and, wouldn't you know it, found even more evidence. Shell companies, kickbacks, property flipping, even targeting undesirables to force them out. Betty and her accountant husband, Brandon Patel, had been running a racket for years. But here's the twist. Betty's grip on the board was slipping. At one especially wild meeting, neighbors started standing up. An elderly woman in tears about spending her savings on required modifications. A dad whose kids were banned from the park for questioning an assessment. Betty tried to tighten her hold, rolling out new rules clearly aimed at me. But the support was crumbling. Even her loyal board members started distancing themselves. Still, Betty had one play left, a nuclear lawsuit. She and Douglas Kim drafted paperwork accusing me of harassment, defamation, you name it. They planned to serve it at my workplace to humiliate me, ruin my rep, make an example out of me. What they didn't know was that Nathan's investigation had wrapped up, and he had something bigger planned. Friday morning, the day Douglas Kim was supposed to nuke my career. The community center's packed. Betty's in her best power suit, grinning like a cat, Kim with a briefcase full of threats. I show up, try not to shake, but knowing I've got backup. Nathan's team is scattered around, dressed like concerned residents. Betty starts her victory lap, Douglas Kim preaching about community values, painting me as this villain. Betty shoots me looks, all smugness and malice. That's when Nathan walks in, calm as you please, and interrupts. I'm Nathan Lee, Attorney General for the state. I need to interrupt this proceeding. Time absolutely freezes. Douglas Kim's mouth hangs open. Betty's smile melts. Nathan reads the charges: embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. Betty tries to protest, screams about illegal investigations, but nobody's listening. She's cuffed and let out, still shrieking as the whole room watches. Nathan lays it all out for everyone. Over $400,000 stolen, 8 years of fraud, kickbacks, discrimination, the works. The board is dissolved on the spot. Douglas Kim gets a visit from the state bar, and the community center turns into a temporary help desk for all the neighbors Betty hurt. Betty and her husband's assets are frozen, her legal team scattered, and the state steps in with new rules for HOA oversight. The news goes wild. Her trial's on every local channel, with people from all over showing up to see the queen of Willowbrook finally dethroned. I get called to testify. Finally, I get to lay out the whole mess in a room where Betty can't talk over me. Jury's not fooled. For hours later, guilty on every count. Betty gets 12 years, ordered to pay it all back. In court, she breaks down, plead for mercy. Not a single person in the room feels sorry for her. But here's the thing. The real win isn't Betty going to prison. It's what happened after. The fear left our neighborhood like a fog finally burned away by sunlight. The new HOA board, actual neighbors, not Betty's cronies, focuses on real issues, fixes the roads, improves the park, spends money where it's supposed to go. Kids play in the street again. People plant what they want in their yards. Nobody's looking over their shoulder every time they wheel their trash can out. I walk my dog, and folks stop me to say thanks for standing up. Nathan's office asked me to consult on other cases. HOA reform becomes a statewide conversation. State law changes, requiring transparency, audits, homeowner rights. Even Betty's old lawyer, Douglas Kim, gets his license suspended. Her husband turns on her for a lighter sentence, gives up his accounting license for good. And me? I discover I've got a knack for this. Helping people fight HOA tyranny, exposing fraud, training others to see the patterns and not get bullied into silence. It turns into a side gig, then almost a second career. Looking back, the biggest lesson wasn't about fraud or money. It was about what happens when regular folks refuse to be cowed. Betty built her empire on fear, counting on nobody pushing back. But once people started comparing notes, once one person stood up and others followed, it was over. Our story goes viral. Other neighborhoods start digging, other Bettys get exposed. The ripples go everywhere. Now, when I walk through Willowbrook, I see a place transformed. Folks joke about never letting another Betty Taylor run things again. The HOA actually works for us. We trust each other again. The story even helps rewrite the rules statewide. More transparency, less room for tyrants. So, what do you think? Should HOA presidents have this much power? Ever seen something like this in your own neighborhood? Drop a comment below. Let's talk about where the line is between protecting property values and just straight up abusing people. And hey, if you ever find yourself staring down someone like Betty, don't just take it. Stand up, find your allies, document everything, and push back. Because justice might take a while, but when it comes, there's nothing sweeter than seeing the tyrant finally get what's coming to them.